Hi there, healers, and welcome to another episode of the Healers Guild. And today, if you're on YouTube, you can see the bisexual lighting going on in the background. I mean, I am a member of the queer community, so why not? And today, we're going to be talking about a subject that, as time is passing, I think is becoming more prevalent in our society and more necessary to discuss. And that is the idea of what has been classified as toxic productivity. Now, productivity is ultimately what is outputted through our actions. And we measure that within economics. We talk about, like, for example, gross domestic product. We talk about productivity of workers, how much is actually outputted by somebody per hour. What does that cost? And the concept of productivity goes back to the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution. It's become more sort of complex and quantified as technology has developed and industrialization has developed. But we are kind of existing now within a social context that is becoming more and more outdated. We're still living and working the way we ultimately did when most people were beginning to now take up places within an industrial workforce where they were doing things like working in factories, working in textile mills. It was very much like you go to the place, you do things over and over and over again, and you do it as effectively as you can, as much as you can, within the time that you have to produce as much as you can, and then you stop. And all of that was already within Europe being built upon for a lot of nations who had sort of embraced the Industrial Revolution, the idea of the Protestant work ethic, that it was important to work hard, and that was virtuous, but it also happened to be useful for the nation that you were within. The Dutch did this, the English did this. And this sort of element of our culture has existed and persists without us really recognizing anymore that it's there. The idea that it is a good thing to work hard, that it is virtuous, that it makes us a good person, that if you don't do it, you are a bad person, you are lazy, you are slothful, you are indolent, you are a taker. These ideas persist, and they really prop up our society, even though we've now moved past the point where we need everyone to be in a factory producing things, because we actually don't. We like the world is capable now of actually supporting people without every single person being engaged in continuous productive labor. To bring that to the individual, we're all existing in this context. We are all existing in a framework now. Those of us who are part of the working class, by that I mean people who exchange their labor for money to live, and that's the majority of us. We exist in this idea that we need a job or we starve. So that's where we start, and part of having that job is performing in that job well enough to keep that job, and that's about showing your employers that you are good and productive. And now this idea has moved outside of work and has started to move into our own personal sphere. And we are finding ourselves thinking about our own personal productivity in our lives that is not about work, but is about us as people, as individuals. And this idea of the productive person as a virtuous person has also translated into our lives. And what does that look like for people? Well, I now see on YouTube all the time people talking about how to be more productive, more effective. You have these kind of productivity and lifestyle gurus talking about how you can have the most effective mindset possible to not procrastinate, to be more focused, more present, constantly learning more skills, constantly having goals, constantly having projects. There is a real ceaselessness that goes on with this. You must be continuously doing something, and it must be useful, it must be productive. And if you're not, then there is this sort of, not explicitly spoken, but an implicitly implied idea that you are somehow lesser than other people. If you're just sitting at home doing what you want to do and relaxing, then you're kind of not really doing what you should. And this is becoming more prevalent, and it's becoming prevalent for two reasons. There are two main sort of aspects of this way of approaching things, which we experience. So, one is this sort of predates YouTube and the internet and everything. It has been in our culture for a long time and is part of the whole productivity and work ethic cultural perspective, which is about don't waste time. You will get told as you grow up, stop wasting time, work hard, focus on your schoolwork, focus on getting a job, work hard, don't waste time, work at your job, show that you're a good, employee, and that you're not going to get fired and you're going to get promoted. And this is part of striving within our careers. But also, that gets taken home in terms of what are you doing sitting there watching TV and wasting your time? Do some chores, or go take the dog for a walk, or go and do something with the children, or whatever it is. There can be a real value put on time that is not about enjoyment, but is about using it in a way that is useful. And who gets to decide what is useful? Well, that's not necessarily clear because it's a cultural value. No one person is really setting that, but we all kind of instinctively know for ourselves what that looks like, and it tends to be things like it's doing. And if it's something that you don't really enjoy but has to be done, then that's probably a good use of time. So I actually remember somebody I was talking once many years ago with someone about this, and they kind of demolished this whole perspective quite well when they were being asked, what are you doing? They were like, oh, I'm just sort of putting my feet up and watching TV, and someone else was like, oh, what? That's not a really good use of your time, is it? And this person was like, what? Are you telling me that unless I'm sitting here reading Proust in the original French, that I'm somehow not effectively utilizing my time? And I think he was perfectly correct in this. I'm occasionally guilty of it, where I'll find myself thinking, oh my God, like, here I am. I haven't even read Das Kapital, like the original book. I'm 44. Like, how have I done this? Well, if I wanted to read Das Kapital, I would have done it by now, or I'll do it at some point. But these sorts of ideas of things that you kind of don't want to do hanging over you as a job, and those are the things you should be doing rather than things you enjoy doing. That is very much part of how we see things. Parents have often, very, very bad at doing this to their children, where what is allowable in terms of free time and enjoyable time, but it sort of shrinks and shrinks as the child grows older. And I think now we particularly have for young people who are like particularly teenagers, what is put upon them in terms of what's expected academically has become more and more rigorous. There's this idea that it's getting less so, and it's like, I don't think so. I don't, like, children now are like groaning under the weight of extracurricular activities and like homework to a degree where I think it actually really, really impacts their mental health. And it's sort of seen as, well, it's character building, and no one likes their jobs, so you're going to have to do that one day, so you don't get a choice. And it's like, it's a bit different when you're an adult and you have ability to make choices, and when you're a young person you're being forced to do this, you don't. So that's one aspect. It's the kind of don't waste time. The other is what is now becoming more prevalent and is being voiced through things like YouTube and TikTok, which is it's kind of the rise and grind mindset. So you hear the kind of like the hustle, grind. These are different words for it, but it's like every moment of the day you should be looking to do something that is going to be financially rewarding, or personally developing yourself so that you could potentially later do something that would be financially rewarding. It ultimately always comes down to financially rewarding. I don't think it's a coincidence that this often comes out of the United States, where laborers have a far worse labor contract with the capitalist owner class, and they will put themselves into positions of jobs that have very poor pay, very poor conditions, and be accepting of that in a way which means they get very little. And then sometimes there's a necessity to have another job or to have a side project just to actually be able to make ends meet. And I want to stress, like, in discussing this, one of the things I will go into is what we can do about this, and part of that is about doing less and being able to enjoy the time that we have. And I want to be very clear, I'm not telling someone who is in a sort of poverty striving situation where they're desperately striving to keep their head above water. I'm not saying to that person, well, just be lazier and do less, because that would be a luxury that they don't have. What I'm saying is that if you're in that situation, you need to potentially do things differently. Maybe you are accepting a situation that is not actually working for you. You may want to try and do something else. I'm also not blaming that person, because they are simply part of a system that is far bigger than them. And the solution to that problem is ultimately for all of us to organize together. And that is part of workers having solidarity together to organize to make sure we have conditions that are good enough for everyone so that we can all have our needs met. Because that won't be given to us by the capital owner class if they can avoid it. So if you're not in a poverty striving situation, then what's going on? If you are kind of feeling like you should be rising and grinding, or just striving generally in your career, what's going on here? Is this because you are being forced to? Are you in a situation that is like oppressive and that you are being made to in this way, where the sort of the labor contract is very much weighted against you and you feel like you don't have choices around what you do? I definitely have worked in those situations. Again, we do have the general labor contract of work or starve, and a lot of people aren't in a position to be like, well, I'll just quit my job and see what happens. Like, most people can't do that. It's getting worse, like particularly in the United Kingdom right now. The cost of living crisis has meant that a lot of people are staying in jobs they maybe don't want, and don't pay them very well, because it's like, well, maybe I won't get something else. This level of precariousness is actually preferable to like nothing. And again, this is not something that we're choosing. This is something that has been constructed, that we are living within. And the solution to it is not to necessarily see it as our individual problem to solve, but a collective one to solve. And we're not solving it. But what we can do in this context that we find ourselves is we can ask, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And a lot of people that I work with in my practice, I deal with a lot of kind of sort of white, middle class British people who've come from a background of, you go and get a good education, you go and get a good job. And part of the culture of those people, I'm one of them ultimately, is that you work hard and you succeed. And striving is part of what you're supposed to be doing. And if you're not striving, you're letting everyone down. You're letting yourself down. Maybe you're even risking your financial security. But ultimately, it's not okay. It's not okay to do that. And I sometimes have to spend quite a bit of time with people, helping them recognize that striver is there in their mind, pushing them, sometimes not in a way that is actually balanced or useful to them, sometimes to a point where that part of them is not a striver. It's actually goes beyond that into slave driver, where you're being constantly forced to do things, or you feel massive shame or guilt about this. I've worked with people who've really talked about this. This is not something I'm theorizing. I've talked to these people. It's very common. It's a very common thing to have. Even if you don't have awareness of it, it can be going on for you. And like I mentioned earlier, the solution to this is not to work harder, because like working harder doesn't actually, you don't, if you're the donkey on the treadmill trying to reach the carrot, you don't reach the carrot. That's how it's set up. You can't reach the carrot. What you do is you get off the treadmill. Getting off the treadmill doesn't mean you stop walking, but you're not on a treadmill trying to achieve a carrot now. what you need to do, if you are realizing, hearing this, that, yeah, actually, I think this might be me. I think might be caught in a striver cycle of working hard to escape my own sense of shame or worthlessness around not striving. It's not to keep doing that. It's not do it more. It's to do it less. It's to start recognizing those feelings are there, try to confront them, hopefully do that in a therapeutic process that can help you do that. And it's also to start saying, I need to be kind to myself. I have been whipping myself. Now I'm going to be kind. I'm going to give myself space. I'm going to recognize that all the things that I have to do simply just to live and survive are challenging. Those are achievements in themselves. I have achieved a lot just by getting up and having food, making food for myself, going to my job, coming home, doing the chores to maintain my house so it doesn't start falling into, like, total pigsty. Already just doing those things is a lot. And then to say to somebody, you're not actually allowed to decide how you spend your time and enjoy that and relax and unwind and recharge, is cruel. That is a cruel thing to do to somebody. It's like, okay, well, you're gonna get on that treadmill for 8 hours, and then afterwards you can break rocks. Is that a deal that anyone would take? 8 hours on a treadmill for the day, and then afterwards they can break rocks, and then they can go to bed. After they've had a bowl of gruel. Is that what people really want? I don't think it's what anyone really truly wants. People can be conditioned to think that that's what they're supposed to do, but I don't think it's what people want. And we don't need to. Again, I go back to where I started this, which is saying we are now living in a world where we actually don't have to do this. The world has enough abundance in it that we don't have to do it. Unfortunately, the world is also structured in a way that abundance is not shared. It's being hoarded by a small number of people. And that is why it feels like you have to work and strive to achieve to have enough. But actually, enough is all around us. We're just not allowed to have it. So again, I want to highlight the importance of seeing the bigger picture and how we fit into it, and encourage you, if you're hearing this, to think, there are people you can work with and organize with to try and change things for all of us. You can be part of that. That's something you could do, not because you have to, but because it's in your interest and everyone else's interests. But for yourself, what you can do is say, I don't have to be part of this. I don't have to be part of this mindset of I'm not allowed to enjoy myself. I'm not allowed to be quote unquote lazy and not be productive in my free time. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can. It's very rewarding. I found it rewarding to run this podcast, to write my book, to set up my business, to do things that I didn't have to do, but I wanted to do them. They have been massively rewarding to me. I've done things in the internal family systems community that I didn't have to do, that I didn't get paid for, that were massively valuable. Those things mattered. But having value and worth for myself is different from doing it because someone's telling me to do it. I'm not doing these things because I have to or because someone's told me to. I'm doing it because it was for me. And that's what I want to give to you. What is it that you want to do for you that's valuable because you think it's valuable? What do you want to do for you that maybe isn't valuable or worthwhile, but you just want to do it? That's also okay to decide that for yourself. I watched a video with someone just today who was talking about a similar topic, and he made the point that he enjoys playing video games as part of his downtime. So do I. And he's heard from a number of people that that's a childish thing to do and you should grow out of it. And he concluded, I'm the one who pays for this flat. I'm the one who went out and got the money and who maintains it and who cooks the food and, like, feeds myself and looks after my dog. I'll decide if I like computer games and if I want to play them, actually. And yes, high five that person. He's completely right. And you can do the same thing. If people are looking at your life and they are not part of your life, or they're not part of your sort of like financially combined household, and they're telling you how you can spend your time, tell that person to do one, because there's nothing to do with them. They don't get to decide that for you. Like, did you ask them to tell you what you should be doing with your time? If you asked, fine. But if you didn't, tell that person to go fuck themselves, because they're just they're part of this unthinking, unconscious, we must be striving all the time or else we're bad people. And I don't think anyone should have to feel like a bad person because they are not on a treadmill or breaking rocks. So I think what I want to say in conclusion is really the thing I really want everyone to take away from this is be kind to yourself, be kind to other people. Don't judge yourself for what you don't want to do, what maybe you find hard to do, and don't judge other people for what they're doing or not doing. Let's recognize that just existing in the system that we have is already very hard. Like just getting up, going to work, and coming home is already hard enough. That person does not need to be shamed into working out, learning skills, learning a musical instrument, building a side project, setting up a side business, going to school and doing more qualifications, getting their master's degree, getting their PhD. People don't need that. Like, it's for people to decide for themselves what is useful to them, how they want to spend their time, what they want to be able to do. And if we help each other by being kind to ourselves, to one another, this cycle of striving that we all exist within, that is actually quite painful to be within, will start to subside. And we can actually start to then be grateful for the ways that technology and social organization has been giving us opportunities to do less. Like with the technology that we have now, we actually can survive and thrive by doing less. But we're so determined to make people do things that we'll actually create jobs and tasks and needs for people to do things that are unnecessary. I mean, if there's a book called The Rise of the Bullshit Job, and that talks about this, in great detail, this need that our society has to generate things for people to do, even when actually, like, it's not necessary, it's not useful. We could now be in a society where people are allowed to not do anything to survive. We could provide food, clothing, housing, medical care, education for everyone if we truly wanted to. The fact that we don't is really all about how we organize society. Ask these people who are sitting on, hundreds of billions of pounds, to share it with the rest of us so that we can actually have that baseline of survival and then start deciding for ourselves what we do, just as they get to. Funnily enough, those people holding that money don't want to share it with us. That's the current social dilemma that we exist within. But it could be like that if we organize together and we made it like that. Right now, start with ourselves. Be kind to you, be kind to the people that you know. Help each other, not be unthinking, unconscious, in pain strivers. Instead, try to say to yourself, what is thriving? What is thriving for me? What are the things that make me happy? What do I value? What would I want to accomplish that I would then feel fulfilled within? Not that someone else could look at me and say, yes, you did a good job and I validate you. What validates me? What do I say validates me from myself? So with that, I'm going to say, I hope that was useful. I hope anyone hearing this can take this into their life and to the life of other people and just point out, hey, I think you're working a bit too much. I think you're putting too much pressure on yourself. I think you need to give yourself a break. I think you can just put your feet up a little bit more than you currently are. That's something that I would like to know has happened from people watching this. So with that, I'm going to say thanks again for watching or for listening, depending on how you're doing this. Until next time, be well.